Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Multnomah County Commissioners Board Briefing. Audience members, I want to start by asking you to please silence your electronic devices. Today's meeting is a hybrid board meeting. Some presenters and guests will appear in person and some will appear virtually, and more than we thought will appear virtually because there is definitely a sickness going around tonight. For those presenting virtually, please make sure to mute your mic when not speaking, and when presenting, make sure to unmute your mic and turn on your camera. For those joining us in person to present, please turn on your mic when you begin speaking so the green light is showing, and off when you've completed your remarks so the red light is showing. For all presenters, please state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. Our first briefing is on the historic harm and hope for repair at the Chinese section of Lone Fir Cemetery. So as we have our presenters come down, I just want to start today to welcome our special guests. All folks who care about and are committed to hope and repair for a section of the Lone Fir Cemetery. We're happy to have you here, and I just wanted to say that Councillor Duncan Huang cannot be here today because of illness, but has been an integral part of the work around the Lone Fir Cemetery, and really appreciate his work today. I welcome you during the 5th day of the Lunar New Year as we say goodbye to the Year of the Dragon and say hello to the Year of the Snake. Today is an auspicious day for this briefing. The 5th day of the Lunar New Year is the day when people welcome the God of Wealth, also known as Yin Kai Shen. This day is believed to bring good fortune and prosperity for the year ahead. Today, we are using this time to be together and to welcome in good fortune and prosperity at the same time that we are engaging in a somber conversation about our history, Multnomah County's history, with the Lone Fir Cemetery and our future work as a community to bring awareness and healing. In October, I was grateful to participate in a workshop hosted by the Chinese American Citizens Alliance Portland Lodge for our community, especially our Chinese American community members. The purpose of the workshop was to review the history and discuss ideas for an apology from Multnomah County for past harms around our actions at Block 14 of the Lone Fir Cemetery. I was glad to be there and glad for our really wonderful discussion with the community. We are here today to continue that discussion. So thank you very much to those who were able to be here this morning, and sorry that there are folks that are ill this morning and aren't able to join us. I want to thank you for being here today, and I want to turn it over to Helen Ying, who has been a leader in this work and a great partner in this work. Good morning, Helen, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Chair. It's great to be here. Good morning, Commissioners. So I'm Helen Ying, immediate past president of the Portland Lodge of Chinese American Citizens Alliance, and also the current vice president. So joining me today, you'll see Michael Yun, who is also on our board, and he's also the lead designer from Knot Studio for this project. And then we also have Karen Vique, who is our beloved project manager that's working on this project at Metro. So we're here today. Let's see, who's helping us with the slides this morning? Because we have
over there is able to bring.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start with the first slide. Thank you so much. So we're here today to tell you about the history of the Chinese section of Lone Fir Cemetery, including Multnomah County's role in the story and the community's hope for a brighter future. Please note our presentation includes topics of racism, harm, erasure, and injustice. Next slide. To orient everyone, Lone Fir Cemetery is located in inner southeast Portland in the Buckman neighborhood, formally opened in 1855. Lone Fir is the oldest continuously operating cemetery in the Portland area. It is on the National Register of Historic Places and is a sacred space where tens of thousands of people are buried. Next slide. The site of the memorial project is outlined by the broken lines on this slide and includes an area referred to as Block 14. At just over an acre in size, Block 14 served as the Chinese section of the cemetery since at least 1887. Even from the aerial view, we can see that the southwest corner of the cemetery looks different than the rest. This is due to a long history of discrimination toward Chinese people by both the cemetery industry and government agencies. Next slide. The Chinese started arriving in the US in the mid-1800s, working as miners, merchants, and laborers. From the 1860s to the 1920s, over 2,800 Chinese immigrants, Chinese Americans, were buried in Block 14. Ledgers were used by community members to record the names of many of the people who were buried there. However, this history was literally buried for decades. It came to light in the early 2000s when the county wanted to sell the land to developers to build condominiums on the property. The Friends of Lung Fur called this matter to the attention of folks at the Oregon Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, which led the community's response, asking the county to verify that no remains were buried before allowing the sale of the land to the developers. An archaeological survey commissioned by the county found evidence of human remains at the site. Around the same time, Rebecca Liu, who served as the principal of the CCBA Chinese Language School, accidentally found the ledgers in the CCBA Hall's basement while she was looking for teaching materials. Finding these ledgers provided illuminating information for this buried history. Next slide. The Lung Fur Cemetery Foundation asked me to join their board in 2012. As I learned more about the buried history and its significance, I brought it to the attention of the CACA Portland Lodge Board, and we have been involved ever since. Here you see an event, a Qingming gathering at the Lung Fur Cemetery that was organized by the Lung Fur Cemetery Foundation last April, and the CACA Portland Lodge supported. Dr. Jennifer Fang, with the back toward us, presented about Chinese American history in relation to Block 14. Next slide. We have helped educate and engage the community about the memorial project. I think we missed a slide. About the memorial project, rallying the community to advocate for funding and support from Metro. Here you see an event that focused on Chinese American history and Block 14 that we organized with support from partners in October 2023, where nearly 100 folks representing diverse sectors of the community were in attendance. We have also participated in Metro's community forums and discussions. As layers of information unfolded, we uncovered the county's role in the erasure of this history, the disrespect toward the ancestors buried in Block 14, and the harm inflicted on the community. And it's during these community engagement gatherings in 2023, people began to ask whether the county had ever apologized for their actions. And that led to suggestion for a call for an apology from the county. Next slide. Our board embarked on the efforts seeking an apology from the county shortly after hearing the call from the community. We held another event last October that was open to all with a special focus on the participation of Chinese American community members. It was, as the chair mentioned earlier, a community discussion on Multnomah County's restorative justice commitment and apology for past harms at Block 14, Longfor Cemetery. Next slide. Over 50 community members representing a diverse coalition, elders, youth, people who have been in Portland for generations, as well as newcomers, participated in facilitated robust small group discussions. Next slide. Here you see a group photo of the folks who were in attendance. Next slide. And here you see a summary of that gathering, the engagement, as you saw earlier, from the community members, and the passion on this topic was palpable in the room. The community is galvanized and cares deeply about the outcomes. And so the recommendations that they shared is to adopt a formal apology. Secondly, funding for memorial capital improvements and long-term maintenance support, and education and public engagement, and cultural and historical observances, and cross-community collaborations. So we're here today, Chair and Commissioners, to request an apology from the county on behalf of the community. Next, we have Karen Vique, who will be presenting more information to you.
Good morning, Karen.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Karen Vique. I'm a senior planner with Metro and have the honor of managing the memorial design project at Lone Fir Cemetery. Thank you for your time this morning hearing about this important history. When this project was restarted in 2021, one of our first, you can go to the next slide, sure. When this project was restarted in 2021, one of our first steps was to hire a research team to better understand the history of the Chinese section of the cemetery. With the next slides, I will share a brief history of the memorial site. Since time immemorial, the land was Douglas fir savanna and part of the Aboriginal homelands, traditional use areas, and trade networks of numerous tribes. In 1844, the site was included in a white settler land claim that covered 640 acres. In 1846, the first burial occurred at what would become the cemetery. In 1854, the land changed hands and 10 acres were dedicated as Mount Crawford Cemetery. Against the backdrop of the Chinese Exclusion Act passed by Congress in 1882, the local Chinese community began utilizing Block 14 for burials and funerary traditions. Traditional practices included disinterring remains to be returned to China so people could be buried in their ancestral lands. By the late 1890s, the Chinese section of the cemetery added traditional elements, including a funerary burner, an altar, and a bone house. The traditional plaque on the altar here reads, "We honor you as though you were present." Through research, we learned a minimum of 2,892 Chinese people were once buried at Lone Fir. And over 90% of the time, white cemetery sextons did not record their names or burial locations in cemetery records. Next slide. As early cemeteries became neglected, the Oregon legislature mandated their public care. Multnomah County assumed the ownership and management of Lone Fir in 1928. At this time, the county began a process which ultimately resulted in the termination of use of the burial ground by the Chinese community, a demand for the removal of remaining ancestors' graves, and finally, the construction of a county building on the site. Next slide. Despite dense trees lining the sides of the Chinese burial ground, with the prevalence of discrimination and racism in society, neighbors openly complained about the traditional practices of the Chinese community and proposed the ground be converted to a park. Next slide. In 1948, 265 individuals were exhumed from the site to make way for a county building. A county transportation department bulldozer was utilized to expedite the process. In 1953, the building was constructed, completely altering the character of the landscape. Next, please. The county building occupied the site for over 50 years. The erasure had been so complete that a county staff person of Chinese descent had no idea he worked on top of a Chinese burial ground. The erasure was so effective that despite nearly 3,000 Chinese people having been buried at Lone Fir, only one person in Portland's Chinese communities today can trace themselves to an ancestor once buried at Block 14. Next. When the building fell into disrepair, the county planned to sell the land for development. However, community members stepped in, reminding them of the site's important history. In 2005, the building was deconstructed, and in 2007, the county transferred the property to Metro, who reincorporated it into Lone Fir Cemetery. Next. The planning effort for a memorial was initiated in 2008. However, plans sat on shelves until community urged the Metro Council to make the memorial a reality. In 2021, $4 million of Metro Parks and Bond funds were dedicated to the memorial design and construction. Next slide. This photo shows the condition we continue to see at the site today. While at first glance it appears to be an empty field, to Chinese community members, it is much more than that. Next slide. This research, other due diligence, and community input have informed where and how improvements will physically happen on the site. Areas 1 and 2, as shown on this diagram, will largely follow conventional construction techniques. Area 3, however, will have a light touch and minimal ground disturbance, with features built up from imported material in order to protect ancestors who remain. And now it's my pleasure to pass it to Mike Yun to share more about the memorial design.
Hello, commissioners. Hello, Chair. Good morning. It's really a pleasure to be here with you, at least remotely today. I am Michael Yun. I'm a landscape architect and a principal at Knott Studio. I'm leading the design for this project. I am also a volunteer board member for the Chinese American Citizens Alliance. I want to start by emphasizing the importance of this moment. The fact that we are here today having this conversation with you is a powerful milestone in the arc of this project. We know that community not only cares deeply about what we do at this site of consciousness, but also who is involved in making that happen. So again, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. If we go to the next slide, I want to talk about just the beginning of this design process. So we started this work by talking with community, sharing information about the history, and discussing the process of healing and repair for over a year. We sought input in order to understand priorities for our work. These 3 priorities emerged during those initial conversations. We heard from community that it was essential to provide a space for learning. And so that means telling the truth about the history of what happened here authentically and directly, providing space for reflection. So creating a space where people, especially Chinese American community, but everybody can come here and process the impact of that history and reflect on it. And then also to provide a space for participation. So ancestor worship is central to Chinese culture. It's a major emphasis of many of the biggest Chinese cultural events of the year, including Qingming Festival and Lunar New Year celebrations. This site historically provided space for community to come together to honor ancestors. And we know that it's extremely important for community to be able to do that in the future. If we go to the next slide, this slide illustrates the 2 preliminary concepts that emerged from our discussions with community. On the left, you see the hill, which provided a memorial wall with the names of those who are buried here engraved at the center of the site. You see that in the rendering on the bottom left. And on the right, you see the grove. And this sought to create the space of reflection by planting a grove of Chinese culturally significant trees, ginkgo trees, across the burial ground. And then also included an educational pavilion that was located at the west side of the site. If you go to the next slide, we took these out to the general public through events at Lone Fir. We had Chinese community-focused meetings to discuss these concepts. We also engaged a group of community members as advisory committee. And we heard several things emerge also as feedback from this round of design. It was important to focus on recognizing and honoring those who are buried here. Again, we wanted to authentically tell the story of the past so that community could learn from this and heal. And again, it was important to conduct traditional rituals at this space. If you go to the next slide, this shows some of the results for those two concepts of a survey that Metro provided or implemented. And we overall had positive feedback for both designs, with a little bit stronger of a positive feedback for the grove. So we took this as we work towards our preferred alternative design. If we go to the next slide, and we tried to bring in key elements from both of those concepts into a concept that we're calling the opening. And this concept is really centered around, again, reconstituting traditional practice. So in the top left, you see a Tudogong shrine. So this is a shrine that is present at Chinese cemeteries to honor the god of the land. And we brought in an element that resonates with traditional practice. In the top, second from the top left, you see what are called spirit tablets at a public temple. And so these are objects with honor, which honor those who have died. And these are found both in public settings as well as private settings throughout China and Taiwan. And then we also brought back in the use of trees as a way to create a space for reflection and to symbolize the healing of the landscape. If we go to the next slide, you'll see the site plan, which focuses a memorial pavilion on the far west side. We have a single arcing pathway through the grove of ginkgo trees, and then we have a public gathering space around the site of that historic altar. So that photo that Karen showed you is taken from the east side of the site, and we are basically recognizing that history and providing space for people to gather and learn there. I'm going to just flip through a few of these renderings quickly because I know we're at about time, but we are very happy to answer questions about this design as we have about 40 minutes, I think, for Q&A. So if we go to the next slide, this slide shows the view of the opening to the memorial pavilion. This has a traditional dual-yan, which is basically a kind of Chinese haiku that's common on the entrance to temples, and a steel screen that uses a graphic from the burial ledgers as a motif. If you go to the next slide, this is a view of the inside of the Spirit Tablet Pavilion. So these are basically representing all of those who are buried here. We have about 3,000 tablets that have the names of those directly from the ledgers engraved, and an altar in the center for the practice of ancestor worship. If we go to the next slide, this shows that same pavilion with a view from the grove, and you can see the interpretive storytelling is integrated deeply into the architecture. We don't want this to feel like a museum. We want this to feel like a memorial and to have it be permanently in that space. And finally, the next slide shows the screening from Southeast 20th. And if you go to I think this will be our final slide. Oh, excuse me. So we have the schedule, and just so you all know, we are in the process of the construction documentation, and this project is intending to go out to bid sometime this upcoming summer. So we are fairly far along in this process, but there is still time for us to have dialogue with you all. And it is a critical moment also in the project, just from a timeline perspective. And then lastly, we really have been thinking about this place as a way to disrupt these cycles of racism and hate that perpetuate throughout history. We feel that there is power both in what we do here and what we're making, but also in the process of what we're doing it. So again, just emphasizing the importance of our conversation today, and grateful for you all to be here as potential partners in this work, and as a process of repair through the apology. And with that, I think maybe we should open it up to questions, or I'll hand it back to you, Marina.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. Really appreciate you walking through that. And thank you, Karen. Karen, I know you're ill today, so really appreciate you being here, making the effort to be here virtually. So we will go to the board for questions about this, sharing comments about this. It's such an impactful thing, and I've had the privilege of having more conversation and more opportunities to engage in this, including a tour that I did with Mike and Karen and Mary Faulkner and Anne and Renee from my team in December, which was really wonderful. And I appreciate that opportunity, but want to make sure that the board has a lot of time to ask their questions and get an understanding of this. So we'll start with Commissioner Moyer. This is in your district. Okay. No, I think it is in District 1. I'm looking, yeah, it's right at the border.
Well, thank you so much for coming today, and thank you for those who participated virtually. Obviously, this is something I think we all wish never would have happened, but I really appreciate the amount of work that has gone in to where we are today. I think this will be a very appropriate and valued addition to the cemetery, and I really commend the work that went into this and look forward to seeing it as a resource for our community. And again, we cannot change the past, but we can acknowledge it, and I think that this is an important step in that direction.
Thank you. Commissioner Singleton.
Thank you. And I echo that. Thank you for the work and really thoroughly engaging community. And clearly, I think they can see their vision and what some of your renderings look like. I just want to uplift that restorative justice is a term that we use frequently in this community, but rarely in practice. And everyone knows a story of injustice here in Multnomah County, whether that's the Vanport floods, Block 14, Japanese internment, the I-5 Rose Quarter, Emmanuel Hospital, and many others. And I think this is one example of how we need to find ways not just to learn from that history, but to actually give back to communities who have been victims of government racist actions. So thank you for sharing this history with us today, but also bringing forward concrete actionable steps.
Thank you. Commissioner Brim Edwards.
Thanks for your presentation, Helen, Karen, and Michael. I had a couple questions and then just some thoughts I wanted to share. Just reading through the materials that Metro, sorry, you could bring that mic closer. Metro has committed some money from the most recent public, the bond measure, and I think it's $4 million. And I'm curious about the designs that's advancing. How much of the $4 million would that cover? What's the gap? And then sort of the estimated sort of ongoing maintenance, and if that would be considered. I believe Metro already has responsibility for Loanfer, whether it would be sort of part of their overall sort of taking care of that larger space.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to invite Karen, who's our project manager, to respond to this question.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you for the question, Commissioner Brim Edwards. Yeah, we, at the 60% design, we did receive cost estimates, and we do have a gap. We are estimating that we can complete the full vision for about $4.6 million. And we have a low-end cost possibility as well if we're not able to do everything, if we need to work more within our means. Of the $4 million that Metro has allocated, about $1 million has gone already towards consultant fees, and another $500,000 towards the research effort, community outreach, and costs for land use process, permitting, et cetera. So we have $2.6 million currently available for the design. I'm sorry, $2.3 million currently available for capital construction. And we are looking for an additional 2.3 match. And then as far as operations and maintenance obligations go, we estimated, I think it's 475 person hours are needed a year to help maintain the memorial, and that works out to about $50,000 a year. Also, that could be covered by establishing a fund at $1.7 million that would we could perpetually draw from as it builds interest, or however that financial stuff works.
Michael, do you want to add anything else?
I think that's pretty comprehensive. I do want to emphasize the fact that we have approached the design with an eye towards keeping the budget as focused as possible, while also trying to respond to the needs of the community and, frankly, standards for design and construction in public space. So what was the power of $4 million 4 to 5 years ago, obviously, as we know through the economics of the recent few years, has changed a bit. But we do, yes, we feel that there is a pathway forward with the base budget, but again, are seeking partnership to uplift the power of the project overall.
Great, thank you for that answer. Very helpful, just thinking ahead. So just some comments I want to just share. As I was reading through the materials, and I also think last year I had a chance to sit next to Karen at a dinner, who told me about the project. As I was reading through the materials and the actions and sort of racist statements made by some Multnomah County officials, the request for an apology seems to me to be, it's easy for me to say that personally I think an apology is definitely called for, given the historic harm by Multnomah County officials. It seems apology is way overdue. I went to high school a few blocks away from the site at Washington High School, now Revolution Hall. And it's been on my daily commute route, in fact, just this morning, for over 50 years. And what's clear, having driven by or walked by this route for the last 50 years, is the county has completely erased really any sign or evidence of Block 14 in the presence of the Chinese cemetery. It's also hard not to note, at the same time, the very careful tending of the adjacent grave sites of prominent white Portlanders who are buried at Lone Fir. So just the juxtaposition of the treatment of two different groups of Portlanders. Apologies have the ability to advance healing, and I'm fully supportive of moving ahead with that. While an apology doesn't have a price tag, there's often some resistance because it makes us closely examine the facts and actions that form the basis of why an apology is required. It can evoke feelings of shame and embarrassment of why an apology is needed, but that's exactly why an apology is so powerful. So I'm fully supportive of moving ahead with that. I'm not sure why there would have been any sort of delay. I would look to Commissioner Moyer, whose district this is in, to lead that, but I'm fully supportive and whatever I can do to be helpful. In terms of the other community recommendations that were included and shared this morning, there are, as we were just outlined, are more financial. And I'm also supportive of that. I'm looking at ways in which Multnomah County, as part of the perpetrators of the harm, can play a long-term role. And what I really appreciate about the design and the approach is that integrated into the design is not only repair with with our community, but also that it includes education and public engagement. Because if we want history not to repeat itself, education and public engagement is fundamental to that. So I'm fully supportive of all of those measures as well. And again, I just want to thank Karen, Helen, Michael for your presentation, but also to the many constituents in District 3 who have mentioned this project. And really, it's interesting because the emphasis has been less on the design, not that people don't want that, but really on the apology as a way to like start the healing with the community. So I just want to appreciate the many community members who have raised this issue. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jones-Dixon.
Thank you, Chair, and I echo a lot of the same comments and sentiments that my colleagues have mentioned. As a funeral professional and someone that have served the community over the last 17 years, this is beyond important, and I'm fully supportive of us coming up with the drafting an apology, but even more than that, moving further, learning as far as ways that we can allocate funds to support the project moving forward. And just personally from our district and my family, again, deeply sorry for just how we've handled this whole situation. So, thank you. And thank you for being here. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you. And so my office has been engaged with Helen and Mike and Karen around conversations about both this project and the funds for this project, as well as an apology. And, I think it's, and so we are looking forward to working with your office now that you're on board. As this work moves forward, we can talk about the timeline and a better sense of what's actually needed. And what that looks like for the county. I will say, in having the opportunity to engage with community members and seeing the site, and really learning about the tough history and the really, I would say, shameful role that Multnomah County played in the decisions that were made, the reasons behind those decisions. I went into this with an open heart and an open mind, because there is a tendency, I think, for current governments or present governments to freeze when it comes to taking action to address past wrongs, and that is not the values of this board that I hear today. It is not the approach that I took, because I think we have to recognize our path. We have to, and really own up to the responsibility that we as a government have had in this, and the responsibility we have as representatives of that government today. So I just appreciate the opportunity. And I think it's a very powerful statement in this time and in this age to be able to have this chance to be working with community to address that. I also wanted to just commend you, because I know that in the conversations that I've had with Mike and others about this project, this was obviously something of very great importance to the Chinese American community, but you also reflected on the fact that this land was indigenous and native land before anyone else came here, and incorporating that into the planning, into the thinking for this project. And I just want to really say how much that was meaningful to me as well. Really, the holistic view has been incredible. So thank you so much for coming here today, Helen. Thank you, Mike and Karen. And again, I know Councilor Wang would have loved to have been here if he wasn't so ill. So We look forward to continue partnership, continue work on this, and thank you for coming today and really shedding a light on something that is, again, not a part of the history of Multnomah County that we're proud of, but something that we need to be responsible for. So thank you
Thank you,
so
Chair,
much.
and thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much. Our second part of our board session today is just an opportunity, something that I want to make a regular part of our board sessions, are to have updates on board assignments and committees. I know that we're in early days and you may not have had very many of these, so there may not be a ton, but any policy work or work that you're doing in your offices or in your districts, please feel free to use this time for that. And so I will open it up and we'll start with Commissioner Singleton. We'll start with you.
Thank you, Chair. So there's a couple of updates I'll share. I think we talked a little bit already about the Homeless Response System Steering and Oversight Committee meeting. That was the first one we have, but as a bit of a little refresher, the focus was for that meeting on emergency shelter, and there's some work that the Homeless Response System staff are doing to get some alignment in both data points and cost, that there's just a little bit of lack of alignment between how some things were being defined and some of the costs that we know for shelter, whether that's overnight, 24-hour, and/or coupling day centers. I think it's just important to note, I think in this community, we often talk about local definitions, and there's some things that just have federal definitions, and an example is emergency shelter, which we chatted a little bit about as a board as well. We also had our first Veterans Task Force meeting yesterday. Just really awesome group of folks on the front lines of this work. There's one piece that was raised that our office will explore a little bit more, but we used to have what's called a veteran stand down, where there was a lot of opportunity for veterans to engage in a wide range of services and get some of their needs met. But that has not been able to happen over the past few years, and there's a strong desire amongst advocates for that to come back. So that's something we'll take a look at and see what opportunities may exist. We also had JPACT, which was a good discussion both on federal strategy this year as far as going to DC and really showing up as a region around our shared transportation needs. There was also discussion around cooling corridors, which I think overlaps a lot with what the county has talked about when we think about climate change. And there was one piece I raised is let's look at the opportunities to leverage investments of existing infrastructure projects. So an interstate bridge replacement, for example, is going about doing their mitigation work. There's opportunities for tree planting, for getting air conditioning units in to renters' apartments. How can we leverage those opportunities to address cooling needs as opposed to everybody kind of doing scattershot their own thing? So more to come on that. And then I think the final piece on that is really the looking at potential transportation bond scenarios. So nothing yet, a lot more staff work to happen, but that's a part of the conversation that will continue at JPACT. Other transportation related was the R1 ACT meeting. The first one was last night that I was at, of course. There's a piece of the work plan that we're giving some opportunity to give some feedback on. So I've sent in a request to have a conversation about workforce needs and investments in Region 1 so that we can really be thinking about this again as a region and not each project looking at their own workforce investments. How can we leverage something together to really have a good impact for folks in our community? So a lot more to come on that as the R1 ACT work plan still takes some time to shape up in the next couple of months. We also have the SHS stakeholder group, and that was a meeting in January on the 10th, right around when we had written a letter for Metro as well. So I did a lot of uplifting what I was hearing from my colleagues here, that we need more time. We need a briefing, so hopefully you all have been briefed on the measure as well as polling. That was something that Metro committed to doing, and as everyone knows, that's been delayed. So it won't be going in May, but there's opportunity to continue that work and discussions. And I think there's really amazing housing advocates, homeless service providers, as well as the business community and our regional, not just metro, but our 3 counties really sitting down to have this conversation and shape something to move forward that will frankly provide some stability to this funding source that I think folks have really been seeking. And just to, I think, say out loud, my understanding of this conversation at the board has been that there is an objection to allowable use, which I know isn't what we've seen in the press a bit, that really it's much more about we want to make sure that the measure is written right, but we know that there's opportunity for land banking or doing gap financing or other things with these dollars that will help us meet as well our PSH goals that we have in our plans and what we need to do locally. And then I think I'll say lastly is, well, I guess I have 2. One is Walnut Park redevelopment, which is a district specific. That's something that we're just kind of getting onboarded to as a staff, and we'll work with the chair and her team on looking at some opportunities for that redevelopment project or potential redevelopment project that has some potential for private-public partnership that could be really impactful. And then reimagining justice in Cully is something that we're working on. Just want to uplift the awesome staff from Lipsick who are involved in this work and really our community-based organizations. We've been working with Verde and NEA. So my team's been onboarded to some of that work, and we're moving into year 2 of this grant, which was Multnomah County received $2 million to fund this pilot. And so we're moving into the implementation phase, and I'll definitely keep folks posted. I know a lot of people have interest in community safety and what some opportunities might look like. And then I think I haven't had earthquake-ready Burnside Bridge yet, but having worked on the project in my past life, I know there's some really cool work happening there, so I look forward to plugging in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. That was a great summary and a review of all the work that's been happening, and there's a lot. Commissioner Brim Edwards.
Thank you. So let's see, I'm going to just briefly move through some of my assignments, but just by category. So in community safety and neighborhood livability, we had a convening of LPSC, or the Local Public Safety Coordinating Commission, along with Chair Vega-Peterson co-chairing that. We've had a presentation of the county's public safety legislative priorities. We also have heard from the public defenders about what their legislative priorities are in terms of beefing up the funding for public defense. And we, in addition, heard from District Attorney Nathan Vasquez about the bills that they're going to be supporting in the legislative session. It was a really great opportunity, I think, for everybody to understand what others are working around for in the public safety space and see where there is sort of alignment and common goals, and how we might, as a larger system of advocates of greater public safety, advocate together. Let's see. We are going to be surveying all of the current members of LPSC, and it'd be great to have also the county commission's input as well on the focus this year. It was great to see some just initial 1-month numbers, but also the end of last year that gun violence is reduction, and that was an area that was brought up at LPSC as sort of potential focus area this year. But we'll be, we can sort, if you're interested in participating in the survey of what LPSC is going to be working on, we can share that with you. In terms of also in community safety, I serve on the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization, and one of the things we're looking at going forward is discussing the Los Angeles fires and looking at it from a Portland perspective. You know, I think there's likely lots of lessons to be learned and can inform how we structure our preparation. In addition, another, just in the category of community livability, the 82nd Avenue Transit Advisory Committee, which I've sat on for the last year and a half. I I believe, held its last steering committee meeting. So on January 16th, we approved the locally preferred option, which includes the transit mode, which is bus. So the TriMet line that runs along 82nd is the most used line in the system. And we also have identified general station locations and a high-level funding plan for the 82nd Avenue Transit project. And the locally preferred option also indicated the sort of terminal point. There was sort of discussion about whether it would be Park Rose or Coley, and the decision was to designate Coley as the, so maybe this is coming to District 2, Coley as the preferred first choice and Park Rose as the alternate site. So it was exciting, the sort of the funding's coming together. There's been lots of community engagement. Public transportation is really important in that area. So it's exciting to think about the possibilities of the investment and the potential economic activity that's going to accompany that project. Speaking of economic empowerment, I had my first meeting last week of the Travel Portland Board. We received an update on convention sales and hotel bookings, which are improving, but they are continuing to recover, so not back to pre-pandemic levels. We also had a presentation on the James Beard Public Market project, which everybody's excited about. One thing that's just worthwhile, and I signed up for this last year, but I would suggest others as well, but the Travel Portland has what's called a good news newsletter, and it shares some of the positive things that are happening in the community from an economic standpoint. I think often we are focused on the challenges before us, and there are many, but there's also lots of very positive things happening in the community, and they have it's a great newsletter because it has some very examples of how we are moving forward. Let's see, in terms of the legislative session and sort of governance, the Association of Oregon Counties have had several meetings around their legislative agenda and how what their priorities are, and many of them overlap with priorities on our Multnomah County's legislative agenda. So we'll be continuing to work on that and provide opportunities for all of us in areas that we're interested to engage with AOC. Yesterday, I was appointed the chair of the AOC District 8, which includes Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas County. And also Commissioner Moyer was appointed to fill a seat representing counties with populations over 250,000. So looking forward to working not only with Commissioner Moyer, but all the rest of us on our joint priorities and where we have alignment with other counties as well. The Multnomah County Audit Committee, which I serve on, we had our presentation to the board, so you all know what happened there. So that's the big deliverable for the audit committee. So, and then the process starts all over again next year. But there won't be a lot of reports from the audit committee from now till next year. In terms of governance, we coming out of our retreat, there was assignments to two committees. One, the comms committee with Commissioner Myron, so we're working on a joint statement
Moyer.
about our future work.
Moyer?
I'm sorry,
Did you say, you said Myron?
Moyer, sorry.
D1.
Looking down that in. Sorry about that. I'm not working on a statement with Commissioner Myron. I think you all know who I'm working with. Sorry about that. And so looking forward to that as being a statement of our joint commitments to each other and the work that we have in advance. Also working with the chair's office on sort of the initial phase of some potential governance changes that we have talked about. So hopefully we'll be bringing those forward, at least phase one, forward shortly. And the last thing is the sobering leadership team that I serve on with the chair. We met yesterday with Mayor Wilson to talk about the proposal, give him a briefing on where we are, and also to make some requests of the city's participation, since the city of Portland is a primary beneficiary of this and has in the past financially contributed and supported projects. So hopefully that will be a strong partnership moving ahead. That's it.
Thank you so much. And I will just say about the LIPSIC, Public Safety Coordinating Council, the local Public Safety Coordinating Council. So those, we kind of by practice, we always publicly notice those. So even though, so we can definitely have as many people on this board as wants to attend, join those meetings. You can, when you join, they'll bring you in as a presenter so you can engage and ask questions on that. It just means if we had a vote, we wouldn't, you know, the people who are like officially in those positions would have the vote, but there's only a few things over the year that we actually vote on. So I encourage you, if you're interested in those topics and that, in the work of that committee, which I know several people are, please feel free to join. We do make sure that those are always publicly noticed and they're public meetings as well. All right. And I think the only thing I would add to that is with the Travel Portland and Visitor Development Fund, Megan Conway is the newly hired, well, I mean, she's been at Travel Portland, but she's new in her position as the new president and CEO for Travel Portland, and that's effective January 1st, so she's coming into this role. She's been great to work with. The whole team, frankly, is fantastic to work with on that, and just wanted to acknowledge that that was a big transition for the organization, but I think it's a really positive one. Commissioner Jones-Dixon.
Great, thank you, Chair. So for us, we have been spending the last month just learning all things as it pertains to the district and meeting all of our community liaisons. And so I'll share about some of the meetings that we've engaged in. A big thing that we did this last month was participate in the East County Housing Summit. So that was hosted by a group of East Metro leaders. We had about 100 folks that attended the meeting, and we had a large conversation, a series of conversations around just housing production, and just the environment, everything east of 146th. And it was brought together by a string of about 6 or 7 East County leaders, and the response has been pretty good, pretty great. It's one of the first times that we've hosted a summit like that in East County. Another big focus of our office is just learning about just the economic development opportunities, specifically around Vance. So our office is looking forward to jumpstarting that project again and working intentionally with the city of Gresham and obviously our staff and then the other partners in District 4 around that project specifically. We've been steeped in briefings around the youth services programming that we launched 2 years ago. We received an update last week. Unbeknownst to us, we went about 480 days without a murder in East County, in our district specifically, and a lot of it is because of the great work that's been led by Iman, Marcel, Larry Morgan, and all of the service providers in our police department and the leaders here throughout the county as well. So I just want to say thank you to them for their leadership, and we're looking to broadening those services out to your district as well, as far as 82nd. So, yes. And Park Rose as well, and the rest of the county, for that matter. And then last week we launched a partnership with Nick Jr., which is the National Institute for Justice Criminal Reform. I think I butchered it, but that happened last week as well. As far as my committee assignments, I'm on MPACT as well. This is year number 4, so we touched on the cooling corridors, and I mentioned Jonathan from our team as far as partnering with him to see if there's anything that we can contribute to the work that they're doing through Metro. We've also been extremely intentional as far as reaching out to all of the electeds in East Multnomah County and also the Metro leadership. So we had Ashton, Councilor Simpson here to share about just the priorities of the county, and then also learning about his priorities for the district and Metro as well. And then lastly, there's been a lot of conversations around just the East County Homeless Resource Center. So we look forward to working with the Homeless Services Department or the Joint Office of Homeless Services around just the center and the services that we offer our neighbors that are experiencing houselessness. And then, of course, working with Commissioner Singleton on the work systems and that work. So I'm looking forward to that in the future. And I have to revisit what I was assigned from our retreat. So, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Moyer.
Yeah, so some of mine have not met yet, but are beginning our communication, so we will be the Children's Levy Commission will be meeting soon, but I have been reviewing materials about grantee performance, and we'll be having a conversation about that. The both aging and disability advisory councils met. They've met together, unfortunately, during our board meeting. So staff attended that, and I'm looking forward to attending personally when that does not conflict with board meeting, but excited to participate in that. Did meet the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Committee, did meet yesterday. We have selected a case that we'll be looking into. And my role will be to see if there is any policy proposals that might move forward from that to hopefully prevent tragedy. As you know, last month we recognized Trafficking Awareness Month, which came to my office from my participation in the Multnomah County Sex Trafficking Collaborative Board. And we will be meeting as a group. I met with the leadership of that, but we'll be meeting as a group coming up. Also, Gateway Center for Domestic Violence Council has not met as well. The Mount Hood Cable Regulatory Commission did meet. I unfortunately was sick, so I did not participate in that, but was briefed, and it is time again for conversations about allocations of funds that are collected through the regulation of cable television. And I will update you when I know more about that. As far as the work of District 1, we have been meeting with a lot of our behavioral health stakeholders internally and externally related to opportunities to greater leverage Medicaid funding to support a higher level of service to people in our community who are experiencing behavioral health crises, that our current service system can't meet those needs. So I do hope to be bringing some of that work forward soon. I've been in conversations with some of you about where that's leading, but the goal of my office is to bring forward a framework to the commission around how we might best leverage our federal funding streams, knock on wood, to meet the needs of that community.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And I just want to say I really appreciate all of the updates and really good information sharing that is happening now and will continue to happen. There's so much going on, and there's so many different ways that we are all showing up on these different committees, that it's, I think having this opportunity to actually hear about what's happening is important, because just because you're not on the committee, for instance, JPAC, transportation affects all of so much of our work in the community and has so many impacts that being able to get those updates are really important, and see if there are ways that we want to be engaged as individual members of this board as well. So appreciate that. I will add just a couple of things based on some of the updates. So the Medicaid, I appreciate the work. I know I've heard from several of you interested in Medicaid and how we're using it and how we can be using it. So my office is working to help just kind of coordinate, especially as it might refer to the health department's involvement in that, and making sure that they are, that there's an understanding of the conversations that are happening around, a briefing on Medicaid, and is that because we have it in different areas within the health department. We have the Medicaid waiver, which is in DCHS, so making sure like we have an understanding. So really looking at how we can get good information for the board so that there's a shared understanding. But I appreciate the great expertise that Commissioner Moyer is bringing to this, and when she talks about Medicaid, it is very impressive. So just appreciate your leadership and all of your work on that. I did want to mention, so we are looking at inviting someone from Metro to one of our board work sessions to have a conversation about some of the proposals and really have them here to be able to answer our questions and really hear from us directly about what is happening with that. I think that will be really important. As a reminder, every supportive housing services dollar we received from Metro last year was spent. We do have carryover dollars, but based on the updated revenue forecast from Metro for this year and next year, that carryover is planned to be spent in the next couple of years. We have, I think one of the things that I really commend Dan Field and his team for is they heard that, there was a desire to really build out that system and make sure these dollars were being used in our community as intended, and they've been doing that work because the spending is important, but even the most important thing is actually the services that are being put out into the committee, and that's what people care about. My goals for this community are the same as what this community greenlit when it's created the supportive housing service measure, which is we'll have to continue to build and fund the safety net to achieve functional zero homelessness, and that is our ultimate goal. So we will continue those conversations. We want to make sure that homelessness for any family, any person is rare and brief. And I will just also say, the SHS funds helped a record 2,230 people in Multnomah County leave homelessness for housing in the last year. Those housing placements account for nearly half of the 5,500 people rehoused by the Joint Office or the Homeless Services Department across all funding streams. So I do think it's important to note here that while we're spending all of our SHS dollars, we're also putting a significant amount of county general fund dollars, state resources. The city is putting their general fund dollars into this work as well. That really was allowing us to double the number of people into housing than we could accomplish with the SHS funds alone. So I want to just lift up that work. And then, yes, thank you, Commissioner Moyer, for stepping up into an AOC role. I think it's important to have that Multnomah County perspective and presence on the board and on the legislative committee. I'm also very glad that Washington County Commissioner Treese is also going to be there, as well as Clackamas County Commissioner Bend West. So we will have good tri-county representation. It always is important as they're having statewide conversation about issues that affect the counties, that we have our presence there as well. So I want to appreciate all of the work on that. So thank you very much. And we spent some time on that today. We'll continue to make a practice of this. And I've really enjoyed this opportunity to hear from everyone. So there being no further business, our next meeting will be a regular board meeting on Thursday, February 6th at 9:30 a.m. This meeting is adjourned.